Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Impact Collective Cross-Border Launchbox with me and Wendy.
Yay!
Guys, we're the home stretch of the program. We're down to our 20 finalist teams, but obviously we want to give you the most love and support and all the good stuff as a little bit of a happy holidays present from the Impact Collective team, especially from the Thai regional anchors. We have a great friend here known as James McCann in the industry, but affectionately called Jimmy, a managing director or Clearstory International, who's going to be talking about PR for startups. Now, why is he qualified to do that? The backstory is I run this tech conference that used to have about 2,000 attendee, and I had a chance meeting with Jimmy in this media lounge at Rise, one of the Web Summit series conferences, and we striked a very long and interesting friendship over many drinks and bars, and just rating the speaker lounge of every cookie, every bit of burger and food we can find. But through that friendship came an opportunity to work with him for Texas, and he had helped us to put the conference on the global map, bringing top journalists and interviews with the likes of Bloomberg and CNN, CNBC, South China Morning Post. You name it, he probably knows them, works with them, and he tells me that he has 150,000 journalists on his Rolodex or LinkedIn. Now, he is a former PR campaign manager at Web Summit and was responsible for attracting all these people to their show, whether it's in Dublin, Lisbon, Bangalore, and Hong Kong, and also a lecturer on digital PR to final year students at the Institute of Art, Design, and Technology. I'm going to say this badly. How do you pronounce this?
Dunleary.
Yeah.
A lot of people who live there can't even spell it, so it's okay.
That's the trap. And yeah, I mean, needs no introduction. If you are in tech media and PR, you'll have met Jimmy in one of the conferences in Asia and globally. He's a great soul and here to give one of his master classes. So without further ado, he's going to do keynote, take it away, and keep sending your questions to the chat, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A in the end. So
Great.
Take it away, Jimmy.
Great, thanks a million, and pleasure to meet you all. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. I have a presentation ready to go. It's very much, let me see here. Oh, there we go. It's very much focused on practical advice in terms of helping you scale your reputation as an early stage company. So I'm just going to, just so you can probably see all my tabs there. Busy. Okay. So yeah. So again, the main focus of this this presentation is around scaling a reputation and what you'll need to know to get media attention. AIM obviously, gave a very flattering introduction. Thank you very much. Just a bit about Clearstory. So after my time at Web Summit and Rise, there was, a big, I suppose, a lot of evidence that early stage startups had very specific needs when it came to public relations. And that in order to help them scale those reputations internationally, so whether we have clients in Canada, the US, obviously Thailand, Hong Kong, Singapore, many parts of Europe, and oftentimes you'll have a company in Hong Kong looking to target Europe or the US, company in Canada looking to target parts of Europe, and so forth and so on. Engaging some of the higher level agencies, your Fleischmans and your Edelmans, pose challenges for budgets and for time. They're very I suppose expensive, and they've teams scattered all over the world. So we offer a centralized operation to run all international PR efforts for early stage startups, typically around seed or Series A stage. We're a team of 15. We've 40 active clients at the moment, including an awful lot of technology events, given my background as a PR manager with Web Summit. We're 3 years old, and AIM was very much a part of our the beginnings of our journey. So happy to help wherever we can. So what are we going to cover here today? So we've got 40 minutes and then Q&A at the end. So by all means, write down any questions that you might want to ask. I've unlimited time at the end of this, so happy to extend that if needed. So what are we going to cover? So the first part, and I think this is often a very common question, which is, when do I start public relations, or why do I start public relations? Am I too early stage? My product isn't finished yet. All of these kinds of questions. So we're going to address that first and foremost. The next element then is that before, I suppose, you get into public relations and getting out into the marketplace and telling people about you and your company, there's just some key considerations to watch out for. So I'll take you through those, just so again, you manage risk, or you've at least assessed it. The next element then is really around your narrative, your narrative or your story, and this is a very key element that a lot of early stage companies miss, and I'll be honest, even a lot of later stage corporates or later stage startups miss as well. A narrative is very important in terms of capturing interest from investors, from potential partners. And it's obviously it contains a lot of content, but it's shaped in a way that tells a growth story, or tells a charitable story, or whatever narrative you wish for to be told. It could be around sustainability, it could be around diversity, but you'll need to have a narrative ready before you commence a campaign. So we're going to cover all of that. Next, effectively, journalists are customers too. So what do they need from you to do their job, and to start thinking of them like customers? Journalists are under an awful lot of pressure. There's a 24-hour news cycle now, and oftentimes when they're working with startups, they need information really quickly and to the point. So we'll talk about some of those considerations as well. Then in terms of actually running your own campaigns, I know a lot of you, are around kind of, pre-seed or seed stage. Some of you are exploring Series A stage funding. And sometimes you just won't have that budget straight away to engage an agency or anything like that. So I'll take you through a step-by-step guide on what you'll need to set up the campaigns and execute them yourselves. We'll look at the basics of storytelling. So when you're being interviewed by journalists, or when I suppose you're maybe pitching a story about yourself or your business, how to shape that story to get a response from who you're targeting, and then a 5-point plan in terms of generating media attention and actually really the campaign itself. What are the 5 key principles? And then we'll get into the Q&A. So first thing is first, I'll just move this out of the way just in case it's blocking it. The when and the why of public relations. So when needs must, I suppose, act. And that's basically the core principle of when you do public relations. And the needs could be around trying to establish initial profile to attract investors, or trying to get your first beta customers, and trying to build up some level of credibility that they'll come on board. They've done a bit of research around you, they understand you're credible, that you've been in the marketplace for a while, or whatever it is. It's typically centered around problems and understanding what problems PR can solve for you. And typically at the very early stages, public relations is used for 4 things. It's used A, to build awareness; B, to assist with credibility. And again, that credibility story, it can be around you, in terms of your academic background, your business background, your professional background, any accolades you've achieved over your career. It could also be around qualifying your company or establishing the credibility of your company. And same issues there. Size and scale, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, is typically the golden rule about it. So the amount of money you might have raised, the amount of funding, the board that you have, potential investors, so forth and so on. So that's really the answer to that question. If you have an awareness issue that people need to know about you, a credibility issue, in which case nobody knows about you, those are the two main reasons. And then you might have market education, which is trying to educate your marketplace on what you're trying to achieve. And I think as impact startups, that's very much a key component of what your public relations campaigns could and should be around. Educating potential users or potential beneficiaries of what it is that you're doing and how it works. And then the last element is market positioning, which is communicating consistently what it is that you do. I don't know if any of you have looked at the Airbnb story, but they've had the same positioning for the last 10 years and how they describe themselves and all of their media and correspondence. So again, it helps, I suppose, establish yourself in your niche and gets you known. So that's the answer to that question. When needs must to act. The next element is that you're going to be faced with what I call the first-time founder conundrum, which is that effectively nobody knows who you are, and that poses a significant challenge, because to the eyes of journalists, media, and maybe even the wider startup ecosystem, where you're trying to raise investment or hire from, or find customers from, you have no credibility, and the first-time founder conundrum is conquered by two elements. Well, I suppose in terms of public relations, the first is time. So you need to allow yourself time to build up your profile. A lot of early stage founders believe that they can go from zero to hero overnight. It doesn't happen like that. It's very much a time investment in terms of public relations activity to bring around the kind of reputation and I suppose credibility that you need a little bit later on in the process. And the second thing is consistency. It's not enough to obviously just wait, naturally enough, for things to happen. You need to be consistently putting out stories, announcements, all of your key milestones, so that over time you start to conquer that first-time founder conundrum of nobody knows who I am. Because the more activity and the more time you give it, the more people become aware of you, aware of what you do, and how you do it. And it's a key part to, I suppose, as a general obstacle. I think anybody building a business as a first-time founder knows that nobody knowing you initially is a massive obstacle. So PR helps you overcome that over time. The next element then is look, credibility is gold, and I think we often see those on the startup journey who've gone before us, get sucked up into speaking opportunities or awards, or investors approaching them hand over fist, because they've established their credibility. And again, as a first-time founder, once you have that established, your credibility, things happen, and they happen a lot quicker than you might expect. From the very beginning. So once you have your credibility established, it helps with sales, partnerships, speaking opportunities, investment opportunities. And you don't have to explain who you are to your prospective audience in future. Once people have, once you've established your own credibility, it often ends up being a very different conversation. And I spoke about these other elements as well: market awareness, which is just building up that provisional profile, market education we spoke about, and positioning we spoke about. So those are the key considerations when you're looking at the when and why of public relations. It's typically to overcome the first-time founder conundrum, build your credibility, and become a magnet to those kinds of opportunities that you're looking for. So onto the key considerations then. So before you say a word, before you start a PR campaign, be very clear on what your objectives are and what you want to achieve from that campaign. And objectives can be very high level or very specific. And I might give 2 examples on this. We had an Irish technology company as a client about 2 years ago now. And they approached us with the purpose of getting one particular publication and getting a feature within it. And it was an investor-focused publication called The Business Post, very well known in Ireland. And, again, it would have a very heavy business and investor readership. And his problem was that he was raising another round, and his existing investor wouldn't come on board. And he was trying to build a fear of missing out effect. So he said, look, I have these 3 key messages that I want to speak about, which is our plans for the next 2 years, who else we have coming in on the round, and some of the key hires that we've made. He's not getting the message. He's not listening to us. We want to get this feature so that people talk to him about us, and that should encourage him to join the round. So we organized an interview with the Business Post publication. It went very well. The key messages landed in the article. He had a lovely photo in the paper on the Sunday, and a big digital article. That a great many people, maybe 100,000 people, would have read over that Sunday. And Monday morning, he got a phone call from the investor, and he agreed to join the round. He says, I didn't know you were doing X. I didn't know you were doing Y. And we don't want to miss out on this opportunity. I spoke to Bob, who's one of the new investors coming in, and that gives us a lot of confidence. We're happy to rejoin. So that was an example of being very specific in your objective, trying to move somebody from a position that they hold to a position where you want them to be. A wider use in terms of objectives is around taking advantage of, say, a Series A or a seed fundraising announcement, where really the objective is to build a buzz in the marketplace and trying to attract further investors into dialogue for maybe a next round, or just to have in the back pocket. You could also look at credibility building, which is usually done around reports or surveys or data, anything along those lines. But what we would always say is be very clear on your objectives, and have it tied into a marketing plan if you have one. Again, oftentimes we have clients come to us and they say, look, we don't know exactly what we want out of public relations, but we feel it'll complement our marketing strategy. And that's absolutely fine. And we'll work with the client in defining how we can help them with their commercial goals, and be very clear on what those are. So objectives, very, very important. The next, I suppose, element that you're going to want to watch out for is, have you reviewed any and all items that have been written about you in the past? And this has come up quite an awful lot. Well, not an awful lot, but it does come up on occasion, where clients, they launch a new venture, or they're looking to promote themselves, or whatever it is. And maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was an incident, or there was a bankruptcy, or there was a, whatever, it could be positive or negative. But that you should be very much aware of taking that into consideration, because it might come back up later on. And the one example I might give, we had a client that I think 5 years ago was involved in a previous venture, was accused of IP theft. Obviously wasn't found guilty or anything about the court case, and he was launching a new venture. And we just needed to be aware of that, so we could prepare some defensive messaging in the event that a journalist might ask about that. And it's very rare with early stage companies that journalists would look that deep into your background. Very rare, I have to say. But always take precautions. And all you have to do is just think about it, have a pre-prepared answer or statement, and that's the job done. Once you get the question, you can deal with it. And the same goes with positive PR. Leverage that. If it's a case where you've been involved in successful ventures in the past, or you have an established reputation in the tech community, in the marketplace where you're targeting. Leverage it, cite it in the communications that you'll be sending out, and make sure people are aware of it. So again, review those items from the past and deal with them or incorporate them as needs be. The other element then is, if you've signed a new partnership, or you're announcing a Series A or a seed round, make sure that you have the required permission from your partners to talk about them, or to talk about whatever it is that you're that you're using. Any third party involvement typically needs their permissions. A note of caution when you're dealing with corporates, and many of you will come across them, on your own journeys as impact startups, but corporates take a long time to sign off on materials, and they can be quite domineering, and they try to make the story about themselves. So hold your ground in those kinds of scenarios, and make sure that you're getting what you want out of that exercise, and try and get involved with them as early as possible in the process, because it will take time for them to go through their marketing departments and PR departments and so forth and so on to get those permissions. But do get their permissions, because otherwise it can spoil the relationship. And finally, again, before you start, make sure that you have identified, or you've written down, clear messaging around you and your company. And we'll deal with that in one of the next slides when we talk about the narrative document. If you go out, I suppose, seeking public relations or media interest, and you haven't a defined narrative or defined story you want to tell, you can end up being disjointed, and sending out conflicting messages. So just be very clear around the messaging that you want to promote. So then, your narrative, your company backstory, is the currency that you're going out into the marketplace to trade with journalists with. Journalists often get, depending on the publications, between 100 and 500 pitches every day. It's a very competitive landscape, and in order for you to stand out, you need to have compelling content, and you need to solve problems for the journalists themselves. So effectively, your narrative is the story that you want to put out there about yourself or your business. It contains all the key messages that you want to promote. And those key messages, again, could be around your product. It could be around your company history. It could be around you as a founder. Whatever those core messages are that you believe will assist you in securing your objectives, commercially or otherwise, make sure that they're in that narrative. But bear in mind that the narrative is about you, your company, your product, and the story around it. A lot of people make the mistake where they believe the core messaging is the story. It's not. Think of the core messaging as the present that you want delivered, and the wrapping paper, all the good stuff is really the padding around it, the story that people are actually interested in. So make sure that your narrative is compelling, that it's what I suppose people might want to hear about. And a good place to start with that is to look at maybe competitors in your space that have been written about in the past, or look at different publications where you want to be featured, and see what they say about different companies and the parts of the story that they focus on. So what are good stories to include? How did you get to your position? Your entrepreneur journey. What I call the sliding door moments, which is, I was, I was about to establish my company in India. I decided to do so in Thailand, and then I met this person and that person, and everything, just panned out. Maybe that wouldn't have happened, if I had gone the other route. But anyways, all those kind of sliding door moments. What qualifies you as a thought leader? Again, qualifying yourself. What inspired you? Very much human interest focused, but it's also your narrative. It takes the whole kind of journey. The overview of the company, your company history, so forth and so on. And we'll go into this in the next slide. But once you make the process about the bigger picture, and not necessarily around what you want to promote, the rest will follow, and it'll follow easy enough. So the narrative document, when we prepare them at Clearstory, is typically 8 or 9 pages. We focus on the following things and the following principles. The first and most critical point is that qualification is the epitome of what you need to target. So qualify, qualify, qualify. Again, as a first-time founder, or even a second-time founder, it's less of an issue. But you need to qualify yourself. The journalists that you're targeting won't know who you are. They might not have heard about you before. They won't know what you do, and they won't know what qualifies you to be somebody to be interviewed. So the qualification of your business and of yourself is of absolute importance. Some of the factors that you can hinge on to qualify yourself: size and scale of your company. Again, funding, like money raised, size of your team, number of offices, number of users on your platform, year-on-year growth, maybe that's revenue-wise or user-wise. If you're happy to talk about financials, that always helps. The other aspects that you can hinge on then, your biography, so your background, maybe academically, professionally, somewhere in your past life you've done some interesting things. You feel free to elaborate a little bit. We had a client from Denmark a number of years ago who had done a certificate from Harvard University. We just took the certificate bit out and said he was a graduate of Harvard. There's creative license that you can take depending on the facts. So elaborate as best or as as less as you'd like. Accolades from the past, if you've won any awards, if you've been recognized for any particular achievements, if you've climbed a particular mountain, that everybody knows of, or anything on those lines, feel free to add those in. Again, it's all about trying to establish your credibility and your standing within the tech community. Lean on your team. If there's anyone in particular from your team that has an interesting background, maybe they work for Facebook, or maybe they work for Line, or any major kind of brands that would be notable, and that they've done a particular interesting job within that company. Leverage that, and the same with your investors. Leverage who's involved in your company. Leverage communities that you're involved in, including the IC community. And really just spell out what it is, what platform you have as a business, how quickly you're growing, again, your background, what motivated you to get involved in setting this company up. I think, again, for a lot of you, because of the niche that you're in, your human interest stories are going to be critical to your narratives. We worked with a mental health app last year, and the founder story was that the founder had depression, anxiety, had gone through various different self-harm issues and so forth and so on, and it established her, like, she was happy to talk about her journey and to talk about her motivations, and her story and her background lent credibility to what she was doing. So that can be a very critical part of I suppose selling your story. And it doesn't matter if you're in the environmental space, sustainability space, health tech space. If you have a compelling human interest story around why you established the business, it can create that that link between the product and the story that a journalist needs to write it up, to disclose. But human interest sells very well. Be very clear in your mission, vision, and purpose of the business itself, where you've come from, where you're at, and where you're going. That's ultimately what you're looking at: the past, present, and future, and spell that out very clearly. What's your vision? How do you see your product or company making an impact in the world? Maybe it's for a particular cohort of people, and you believe you can do X. There was a medtech company, again, that we worked with last year, that was around helping cancer patients access information from their doctors. And it wasn't revolutionary. It just sped up the flow of information between the hospitals and either themselves or their care team, and it just cured a lot of anxiety and uncertainty in the process. And there's a massive story behind that, and it's very human interest focused. But the vision and the mission of the company was centered around giving peace of mind to those who were sick. And again, very clear vision, and something that journalists would love to write about. Then you have your positioning, again, just making sure that's very clear and concise. Your product features, by all means, outline what it is that your product, your company specializes in, what product features there are, what product features are coming down the tracks, but don't focus on the mechanics. You don't obviously want to focus on that built with JavaScript or anything along those lines. Not necessary. And then contextualize it in the marketplace. And this is again an issue that's often missed. Journalists haven't got time to go off and do the background research as to why your company or your product matters. So try and help them to the conclusion and outline kind of where you're at in the marketplace and how you fit into it, and contextualize yourself. And that should help close those gaps. So then journalists themselves are customers too, and what do they need? So their day-to-day job is mainly around news. So funding announcements, mergers and acquisitions, maybe key milestones for companies or reports or anything along those lines. But have a think about what news your business is generating. Even if it's a case where you've, again, won an award or you've been accepted into a particular program, it's news for you. And just putting that out into the marketplace, it's relevant. They might not write about it, but they will take note of it in the worst case scenario. And again, it's all about just building up that credibility and awareness with the journalists that you're targeting. So any potential news announcements that you have, maybe it's a new board member or anything along those lines. We'll go into it a little bit later on, but feel free to promote it. So what can you tell the journalist about your company that you haven't told anyone else? If you're looking to go down the exclusive route, and go to a journalist, maybe TechCrunch or Deal Street Asia, whoever it is, but maybe offer them something about your business that hasn't been disclosed before, and they'll typically take that and write a nice feature about it. But announcements is probably your easiest way to get that initial traction. Human interest stories, again, very much of interest to journalists, taking the trials and tribulations of entrepreneurship or some of the challenges that maybe you've had building a business during COVID-19. These are all stories that help, I suppose, close that gap with journalists. We have a Mauritian client who went off and became a monk for 4 years, took a vow of silence for 2 years. And there's an awful lot that we can do there in terms of pitching to maybe entrepreneur-focused publications around what a vow of silence taught him about entrepreneurship, or how it prepared him for entrepreneurship. I'm sure a lot of us would appreciate that by times. But again, human interest stories do well, and you typically, with news announcements, you would present them as press releases. And with human interest stories, you present them as pitches. So, going to a journalist and, hi, Bob, I thought you might be interested in this story. This is a bit about myself. This is what we're doing. Would you be interested in talking to me about how those experiences, led me to the path that I'm on now, and so forth and so on. So they can all help. Opinion pieces then. So these are very much around thought leadership and establishing yourself in a particular space as an expert. They're typically, you can do it two ways. You can write an opinion piece and pitch that to editors, or you can pitch an op-ed, an opinion piece, to a journalist or an editor, and if they like it, they'll ask you to draft it and send it on to them. But they're very efficient ways of getting some provisional traction in the marketplace around you and who you are and what you do. Commentary then, so perhaps one of your competitors has folded due to controversial reasons, or maybe there's been a recent development in the marketplace and you want to offer commentary on that. You would typically prepare a statement, maybe a paragraph or two, address it to the journalists in question that are likely to be writing up the story on it. And send it on to them. And when, like, typically if you like, this is called newsjacking, but if you send a statement in the middle of a story and you have established credibility, or you've done so in your pitch, you've established your credibility in your pitch, the journalist will copy your statement and insert it into the piece. And it's a great way of getting some top tier media coverage without having to go through the rigmarole of being screened by a lot of the higher tier journalists. So those are the 4 tools that you have to use: news, which is announcements or exclusives; human interest stories, which are pitches, around your founder journey, so forth and so on; opinion pieces, and commentary. So then into the practical element, the campaign planning and scheduling. So you have your objectives, you have an idea as to what you want to talk about, you have your narrative. The next thing then is to plan your activities, what announcements you have in the pipeline, any pitch ideas. Maybe have a brainstorm with the team and say, maybe journalists will be interested in this story about us, or how our product will be able to achieve X, or whatever it is. But have a brainstorm, put some ideas on the table and write them up. Agree a schedule of outreach. Again, it can be like, we would run campaigns that are effectively a year long, and they're focused on that reputation building element. But we might break it into 4 or 5 parts, depending on the geographic reach, the sector reach, or maybe even just specifically the specific, I suppose, objectives of the client. But we break it up accordingly. So agree a schedule of outreach and make sure everybody is aware, everybody involved in the campaign is aware as to what's going on and when they need to provide materials for. Appoint a point of contact for your PR activities. So if it's a case where multiple people are supposed to be doing it, it'll never get done. Make sure there's an owner of the campaign and the execution of the campaign. Ensure a spokesperson is available throughout the campaign. We had an opportunity about 2 weeks ago with a client for the BBC in the UK, and both founders were off on holidays, even though they'd authorized the release of the story, and they didn't tell us. That's a big opportunity to lose. Just make sure that you have somebody there who can speak on behalf of the organization throughout the campaign. The campaign plan isn't set in stone, but if you do change it, make sure to notify the stakeholders. So obviously things change over time throughout a campaign. So make sure that you can notify your stakeholders as to whatever those changes are, so they can prepare in advance and it doesn't derail the campaign as a whole. In terms of the step-by-step elements then, so once you've planned your activities, the next thing you want to do is be clear on who you're targeting in terms of media. Go back to your objectives. Think about if you're looking at business to consumer coverage or business to business coverage. Maybe you're looking for both. Research journalists who have written about your industry recently through Google, or obviously various different publications that you might want to target. Research the journalists on Google, find out their social media profiles, their email addresses, their Twitter and LinkedIn. Follow them, connect with them, via all the various different platforms, but don't harass them. So the idea here is that if you connect with them on LinkedIn, you can start posting information about yourself that they will see. Same with Twitter. It just builds up that general awareness. So when they get pitches or press releases from you, they know about you. They know what you're doing. They know what you're about. And it's a very quick and easy way to build up notoriety with your target journalists. Depending on your sector and your geographic reach, put together a list of 25 to 50 target journalists. Just make sure they're hyper relevant and make sure you can get their contact details. A lot of you do lead generation, I'm sure, by default. Just take the URL from the so if you're targeting the Bangkok Post, for example, like it could be john.smith@bangkokpost.com. And just verify the email address, and you'll be able to take it from there. But again, be very clear on who you're targeting media wise. So then in terms of standing out, identify your USP. So what is it that makes you unique compared to your competitors? That's going to be one aspect that a lot of the higher tier journalists will be looking at. Be able to describe yourself and what you're doing very simply. That's your positioning statement. So Airbnb, I think, describe themselves as, the world's first platform for making, actually I can't remember what it is, but it's been the same for the last 10 years. But be very, very clear in terms of your positioning statement. Be bold and brazen, right? So rejection is never personal, and you're not going to be attacked at such an early stage in your development. So don't be worried about expose stories and so forth and so on. You're not at that level yet. It's not an issue or a concern. So come up with some bold ideas. Maybe you disagree with a particular mantra that's adopted by the industry. Obviously, like within reason. But be bold and try a couple of maybe controversial or against the grain, we'd say, against the grain ideas. Give it a go. It'll help you get attention, and get to know the who's who within your space, journalist wise, and build up a relationship. Maybe send them on some updates here and there, invite them out for lunch, meet them at conferences, that kind of thing, and all of that will make a big difference. Content creation, then. So these are the key stories that we would lead with on a regular basis. So job announcements. Journalists love hearing anything around 20 jobs to be created in Bangkok, or 20 jobs to be created in Singapore by new tech company that is doing X, Y, and Z. It's a good local news story, and during COVID, where there's a lot of high unemployment, any job announcement is typically a good job announcement. Employment numbers or employment figures in general. So if you've reached 100 employees or 50 employees or 20 employees as a business, again, for local tech publications, they like to talk about those key milestones of success. Whatever company announcements you have, maybe you've reached 10,000 users. Again, maybe you have a new board member who's very well known in the sector. Maybe you're appearing at an event. Anything along those lines that are seen as company announcements, milestones, reports, anything along those lines. As I say, get them out there. Fresh statistics from your company, maybe from the 10,000 users that you've on your platform. You can dissect that into unique insights. Produce a PDF report from that and send it out. Any key insights are always very valuable, especially when it's your own data that you're using, because nobody can copy it. Any quirky stories. In terms of, again, that one that I spoke about, taking a vow of silence for 2 years and then going into entrepreneurship. We had a French founder who started off his career in New York, on street corners selling, the New York Times, and it's a good way to relate the story to the journalists themselves. So any kind of quirky stories, throughout your life, have a think about those, or even the company, maybe it's a transition that you've had over COVID, anything along those lines. Consider those. As I say, human interest stories always sell very well, and anything again against the grain, controversial opinion. If you believe it and you think you can stand over the argument, put together a pitch and see how you get on. So then approaching journalists. So how to go about it. So first of all, research them, what they've written about in the past, and find their contact details. And if you can't find their contact details, have a guess and validate their email addresses. Don't target their personal email address as a rule. A lot of them can be quite sensitive about that, and they'll just strike you off their lists. So focus on their work emails. Initially, always email. So what we would typically do is we email the journalist, we do a follow on, we kind of build up rapport with them. And once they've agreed to do a piece and to write a piece, then we can ring them, because we're in dialogue and they're expecting our calls and so forth and so on. Well, what was always, well, probably what is a common practice in Ireland and the UK, is that you send out a press release and then you get an intern to ring around the newsrooms to ask if they got the press release. Nobody likes that. It's a total waste of time. And maybe 10 years ago, before, like, there was so much content to get out there, it was useful, but not so much, not anymore. So email is your friend. You can obviously get in touch via Twitter or LinkedIn if they like those kinds of approaches. But email is the way to go in the main. Follow up. So if the journalist doesn't respond, email them the next day, or like what we typically do with press releases. We send out the press release in the morning. We send out a follow up in the afternoon, just to make sure they get it. Remember, the volume of their inbox is enormous. They're getting between 100, 500 pitches a day, depending. And they might see your story, but they might not have had a chance to reply to it, and then something else comes up and they've forgotten. So absolutely follow up. Follow up the afternoon. Follow up maybe the next day as well. And don't be worried about kind of giving them a nudge. Then once they've agreed to do an interview, get their WhatsApp, get their phone number, kind of keep nudging them down the track. It's never anything personal. Usually it's just a case that they're flat out busy. And as I say, connect with them across the different social media channels. The basics of storytelling. So when you get an interview, for example, and you're doing some interview preparation, be able to talk about your story, be very clear on that. Oftentimes journalists get on the phone with a founder and they're incoherent. They haven't got a clear narrative. They're bouncing from topic to topic. It's very confusing for them. They need to be educated about your business and the industry. So be very clear on the story that you want to talk about, how you develop the product, who inspired you, and the challenges you faced. The narrative will help you with that. It'll give you, a document to have in front of you with some keynotes, and you can just read off those notes. And the reason for the narrative is it helps keep your story consistent across all the various interviews that you'll be doing. And it helps you identify the most compelling parts. Be able to describe your product and the problem you're looking to solve in very simple language. Oftentimes, journalists haven't got the expertise you think they have in your target sector. Just bear that in mind. It's not a case that they're incompetent or anything along those lines. It's more a case that they cover a broad area of industry. They might not have come across particular topics that you're willing to talk about, or it could be a breaking story that they didn't even know was part of the industry 3 hours ago, and they're trying to play catch up. So oftentimes you'll find that the journalists are looking for an education, and give it to them as best you can. And obviously, make sure that you're getting your story in there as part of that. But a key aspect to it is tell them in plain, simple language. Don't use industry jargon. Explain the concepts. So if you're like, oh, we use ETP, and then you move on. Explain what ETP is. Explain the concept around it or the context around it, and guide them through the journey. They might say, oh yeah, no, I understand what that is. That's fine. Move on. But again, make sure that you're being very clear in terms of the product and the problem that you're solving. Be able to talk about your unique selling point. What makes you guys different? Because they'll probably be aware of your competitors. So when they're talking to you and they say, oh yeah, okay, well, what makes you different from company A or B? Make sure you've very specific answers to that, and say, well, A does X, but we're actually focused on Y, and we've been able to develop a solution around this that they haven't. Very clear, very easy to understand, and they can write a story from that. And be able to talk about your ambitions on a global scale or a local scale. We have here, could you be the next Microsoft? It's not all about taking over the world, but this is that statement around your mission or your purpose. What is it that you're trying to solve, and what's the impact that you are looking to make? And when you're talking to journalists, when you're doing interviews, get that across as easily as you can. What are your ambitions? What's your mission? What are you looking to solve? And then be able to include facts and figures to give yourself credibility. Just in the last month, we've brought on 2,000 users. That's a 200% increase on what we've done the previous month. We're really excited now. We're expecting of an increase. Get them excited about your story. They want to be the first to discover you, I might add. A lot of journalists, top tier journalists especially, they don't want to be the first to write about you because it's reputation risk on their side, but they also don't want to be the last to write about you because it means that they can't spot a story. So be the ones that, like if you do get an opportunity, you'll probably start off in mid-tier level publications. Then you'll get a phone call from a Bloomberg or a CNBC or something like that. They want to be the first to discover you. So facts and figures are crucial to that. And then, like as a high level recap, set your objectives, get your media targeting right and your research right, plan your campaign, get your content production operation moving, and conduct your outreach, and just repeat that cycle. Remember, time and consistency. So the more time you spend and the more consistent you are in promoting your business and your announcements and your milestones, the faster that flywheel will work in your favor, and it'll open up doors and opportunities that you didn't think were out there for you. Again, you can repeat it weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever way you want to do it capacity wise, but that's the formula in very simple approaches. And that's it, folks. I probably went a little bit over the 40 minutes there. Apologies, but I might open it up to questions.
Yes, we do. We've got a good volume. Keep them coming.
Great.
We are going to go with the first one. Well, we do have somebody asking for the deck. Really helpful advice from Jeffrey. Is enamored. Okay, let's go with Charlotte. I sent a few of mine, but here's one. Given the high volume of emails that journalists receive, would you recommend just giving a brief pitch and asking for a follow-up, or sending a complete description of all the points you'd like to have them cover?
It's a good question. So the formula that we would follow, we have 18 editorial principles that we use at Clearstory to overcome this challenge of getting journalists' attention. The first principle is around the headline and the email title. So, again, you need to break through the noise. So try and make your email title compelling. I often tell my team to look at a lot of the tabloids and how they create their headlines or their subheads as, like the way to go. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is that in the first paragraph, you want to explain what we call the 5 W's. So the who, the what, the when, the where, the why. So that gives the journalist, in a very quick take, what it is that you're pitching, what the story is, and who you are. And that means that you have to be very concise. But, it could be when you're describing yourself as, look, we're a 5-time award-winning company that has recently raised, $500,000 in the mental health space, full stop. At least that helps qualify a little bit about yourself. You have money, you're in the mental health space, you are award-winning, so you're already achieving accolades, and then it gives you an opportunity to kind of talk about what it is, whatever the pitch is. When you're outlining then the rest of so at this point, the journalist has opened your email, they're curious, they have found out what it is that you're pitching and who you are. Then you want to give them the detail around the rest of that story. The rest of that story, and that could be, just be very brief on the detail, but give them the raw material that they're going to need to get the concept right in their head. And then at the end, if there's anything else that you want to fit in that you think is relevant, add it in at the end. And like we call that the information hierarchy. Where do we need to position this information so that we're giving the journalist what he needs to make a decision on this story as quickly as possible? The ideal size for a pitch is maybe 2.5 to 3 paragraphs outlining. And I know it doesn't seem like an awful lot, but your objective is to trigger them into being interested, qualifying yourself, pitching an interesting story, giving them the detail around that story, and giving them a way of contacting you, or a call to action, basically how to move things forward. And you're typically asking for an interview or a phone call. That's what you're looking for. I hope that helps.
It does. Now we've got more questions coming, but you mentioned an interesting point, which is, for a lot of founders, they might not have. They can get all this going, write 2 paragraph, but at some point, they're already winning so many awards and they're quite popular. They're getting some recognition already. Like, when would be a good point to start thinking about, running PR campaigns and investing in it versus
And
I'll just do
yeah,
it on my own, kind of ad hoc, or wait to whoever lands on my inbox and just
sure.
go.
So I suppose it depends on it's resource dependent really at that stage, and again very much around what you're trying to achieve, what your objectives are. We often have like we work with a lot of founders that their team is quite small, maybe less than 5 people, and we're like the first 2 weeks quite intensive, and then we take the shoulder of the burden where we coordinate all the interviews, we do all the press materials and so forth and so on. What I would say to that question is do it yourself up until the point where it's no longer feasible, and then look at getting outside help to assist you with that, because they like your ideal agency is somebody that can produce all the materials, do all the strategy, and basically just follow your instructions. So if it's a case of it's like, look, we want to build awareness in Singapore and the Philippines, we're targeting business publications, and we're targeting like business publications to hit investors, and we're targeting national publications, or to hit the consumers, the mental health side of things, whatever. Your PR agency should be able to come up with a very clear strategy for that, a very clear plan. They should be able to produce the content, execute on all of that, and just deliver you media opportunities. That would be their job. So the only time investment then is really just interviews, and then you get your reward. So again, it's resource dependent, and it's objective dependent.
Interesting. Now, it kind of leads into Joginder's question, because he had some bad experiences picking agencies. So any pro tip on the right agency? Like, what are good signals? What are really like the strong signal of a really bad agency?
Sure. Well, I might just kind of give a bit of context. I did have a slide that I was going to include. I just didn't think I'd have time. But so the main pitfall for most early stage startups when they're picking a PR agency is that they pick an agency that doesn't specialize in the challenge of early stage PR, which is that first time founder conundrum. Oftentimes you'll find that agencies, they'll pitch, you're not an established brand. So an awful lot of work has to go in to creating content, creating a backstory that brings the journalist to you. Some agencies have established relationships, and you'll get maybe 3 or 4 pieces, from their network, and then you realize things dry up after that, and that's simply because they haven't the background in content creation. So your ideal agency at the very beginning is an agency that can produce the content for you, extract all the newsworthiness that you guys are producing, that specialize in establishing your credibility, and again overcoming that first time founder conundrum. It's very easy to work with an established brand and to pitch around ideas and roll them out because the journalists know who they are. There's already a track record there, but the ideal agency for an early stage company is one that can produce the content, come up with the ideas, and solve that problem for you. The other aspect is cost, because I know this is there's various different models when it comes to PR agencies. There is the retainer and per hour model, which is that you sign up with an agency at €2,000 per month. You get a certain amount of hours, a certain amount of activity, and beyond that, then you have to pay by the hour. So if an unexpected announcement comes along, that can end up costing you an additional €1,000, or maybe there's a meeting that you want to call, to give out to them, maybe for not producing results, and that's going to cost you £500 just to give out to them. So for early stage companies, that isn't a model that is good for budgeting, because costs can run away and then you don't necessarily achieve, and there's frustration as part of that. It's mainly fitted towards bigger companies that have bigger budgets and an actual marketing team and so forth and so on. Then there's the flat fee model. We would practice the flat fee model, which is we charge €2,000 a month or whatever it is, and we deliver X for you, and focus on outputs, which is press releases. So we'll send out 2 press releases. We'll send out 2 press releases and a pitch, or whatever it is, but they don't commit to any deliverables. And again, for early stage founders, that time and consistency element, you need traction from the very beginning. We call it a breadcrumbing effect, that you target mid-tier publications initially to start building up provisional profile, to start landing that core messaging, and then you slowly progress into higher tier, top tier publications from there. And you need to get deliverables for that. And there's a big, when I say deliverables, I mean, like, maybe the agency will agree to a number of pieces, tangible pieces per month. And we would always commit to 2 at a minimum to achieve that breadcrumbing effect. But if you're just getting deliverable on output, the issue with that is that the agency you're working with might not be very good at editorial and might not be good at closing the gap with journalists. They might have expertise in the sector, maybe supply chain or manufacturing or medtech, but because you're an early stage company, they might not be able to establish your credibility and produce the kind of editorial that will be needed to bring you further on down the journey. So again, focus on deliverables on the flat fee model and not the outputs. Then you have freelancers, which, again, they practice, the per hour model, the retainer model as well. It can be very hit and miss with freelancers. I would also, like, if you're looking at case studies, I would often focus on a case study where a company had no profile before they worked with an agency, and then at least had some profile after they worked with an agency. Like, that's, you'll often get agencies that they send over rakes and rakes and rake loads of top tier media coverage for a company that already had provisional profile. They already existed in the public realm. For you guys, what you want to focus on, an agency that has proven that they've taken a company from obscurity to a position of prominence, because it shows that they have experience in it. And then the last thing I'd say is, there is the pay per success model, where and we'd often have prospects coming back to us who have been burned in the past with agencies and say, look, we're happy to pay you for coverage that you generate, but only on a success basis. And there are some agencies that practice that model. Some of them have partnerships with media organizations. They send out your press releases, they get featured, and they might charge you €1,500 for a piece that nobody reads. You end up kind of running that risk. From an agency perspective, it's a high risk business model, because it means that even if you get those hits, it's eaten bread, and your client might not pay for it. And also, like how you value those pieces in terms of commercial cost can range very differently. So if, for example, you get mostly mid-tier publications and the agency charges you €500 per hit on that, a lot of volume can come from those hits. So you could have 10, you send out a press release, you can end up paying for 10 pieces, end up paying $5,000 for 10 mid-tier pieces. Look, fair enough, it might be a decent return of investment for that one announcement. But in the off chance that you get a TechCrunch, or you get a Wired, or a Bloomberg, or a CNN, or something like that, the agency might charge you €1,500, maybe €2,000 for that piece alone. So again, from a budgeting perspective, you think you're saving money and cutting down costs, and because it's on a success model, but it could end up blowing your budget very quickly, and so you lose out on that consistency element. And then very, very last thing, sorry, around the fees. So when we started off as an agency, and we're always very transparent on our fees, we charged €1,000 per month. That was when there was 4 of us. As agencies scale, typically, the wage bill scales with them, and like 75% of costs for a PR agency is in their staff. And that's just the reality. So typically, the bigger the team, the bigger the fees, or the more expert the team, the more expert the fees. We charge between €2,000 and €2,500 per month now, depending on the size of the campaign, if you're looking to go domestic or international. And that's our niche. We won't go beyond that in terms of our pricing. There are, like that's on the standard kind of PR model. There are obviously, speaking opportunities where we act as a speaking bureau or stakeholder engagement, research, competitor research. There's other services that we provide, kind of, for startups that are later on in the journey. But again, be very clear on the budget, be very clear on the deliverables, and be very clear on the model. And I hope that gives you guys just an insight into how the agency world works and how you can identify value from it.
Awesome. That was a masterclass in PR right there and how to pick great agency. We have one really last quick question, and there's a few from me, but I know everybody needs to go to dinner. So what happens if you've done all this homework and it doesn't get picked up when you had your big launch and big push, and do you still keep sending that follow-up email?
Keep going. Yeah, you keep going. So like what we say to the team, and like, we would produce an awful lot of content for clients, and you maybe get a hit one out of every 3 pitches or press releases or whatever. You have to keep swinging, and that's the rule that we have. If you've run out of a bank of ideas, sit down and generate more. Maybe look at your processes, maybe look at how you're writing up the releases, cast a critical eye over it. Like, we've been improving processes since day one, and we still have pitches that get sent out and don't get anywhere. And that can be because of what's happening in the news cycle on the day. It can be because maybe the media targeting is off. It could be for a whole host of reasons. But iterate. It's like product development. Just keep swinging, and you'll get there eventually. Journalists who it's not relevant to will come back and tell you that, or they might even come back and say, you know what, thanks for sending this on. Very interesting to know about you guys. This wouldn't be for me right now, but let's keep in touch. And now you're at the beginning of starting off a relationship. So that time and consistency model, if you follow that rule, you'll start to generate media interest pretty quickly.
Awesome. And parting thoughts, last pro tip before we end this. If startups are either a seed company or about to raise a Series A, if they're to practice the leanest but the most meanest PR ever, what do they need to do? What do they focus on to get?
Yeah, I think if you're focus on getting your key messages into the marketplace. So if you're a seed stage company or even pre-seed and you're looking to raise a round, getting a handful of key articles in relevant press for investors could make the difference, between closing a round or not. Investors, as many of you well know, come in different shapes and sizes. Most of them are very busy sourcing deal flow, and they're like journalists. They're not an expert in every space, and they tend to take third-party sources as gospel. Like, most of our clients say to us, look, we want to get in TechCrunch because we're raising a round of funding, and we know investors read that and they get really excited when they see a company in it. It gives them instant credibility. So focus on your credibility building. If you need to be lean, focus on credibility building and communicating your core messaging. That's it.
Awesome, folks. I know you're starving. I'm starving too. I don't know what time it is there in Dublin, but I think we've got a masterclass, and we definitely need to invite you back for the next cohort. But I hope everybody had a great session with the Impact Collective cross-border Launchbox, and this one is definitely for those swinging for the fences, ready to go regional, go global. Like everything, it is an investment. You gotta put a little bit of fuel to the fire, and then you just can't wait and pray that somebody would randomly come and pick you up on TechCrunch. And sometimes everybody needs a 12th man to kind of root for them, bat on their behalf, and keep the ball rolling. So, well, until next time, everybody, this is an amazing turnout. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you again, Jimmy. I've dropped the link to the site, clearstoryinternational.com, in the chat. And obviously there's some really good articles that the team has produced, doing, as I can see, some inbound marketing right there. It's a good man, practicing what he's preaching. And I hope for the teams that are going to do the finals, all the best with your demo day on Monday and Tuesday. For everybody else, please come and root for your friends. And don't worry, you still have a shot at raising funding, both from Impact Collective and from the community at large. Thank you so much for joining us.